orphan, student, engineer, father, public servant, president. All these titles fit a boy born on the prairie, but not one can fully describe the man that saved millions from starvation. Herbert Clark Hoover was born in a Quaker community in Iowa in 1874. Possibly he got his inventive nature from his blacksmith father, or his compassion from his mother, a lay preacher. Young Bert played with his friends and did all the normal things Iowa kids do. However, his idyllic life wasn't to last. His father passed away in 1880, his mother in 1884. The Quaker community supported and nurtured the three small children, Herbert, his brother Tad, and sister, May. As a teenager, he worked for his uncle in Salem, Oregon. He was industrious and dedicated, working all day and attending school at night. When Stanford University opened in 1891, Herbert saw his chance for a higher education. At Stanford, he excelled at mathematics and science while working at part-time jobs. While pursuing his studies in geology, a real gem caught his eye, Lou Henry. Herbert decided that the fellow Iowan should be his wife. Later, she decided he was right. Herbert knew that to raise a family, he'd have to become a successful businessman. Upon graduation, he started his career in mining. Within months, Mr. Hoover had been promoted to shift supervisor. He wanted to advance into management, so he applied at the largest mining firm in California. There was only an opening for a typist, but he took it. He impressed his boss with his knowledge of mining and geology and was soon promoted. At 23 years old, he was recommended for a job in a London firm. He accepted, and his first assignment was to rebuild a mine in Australia. The outback has weeks of temperatures above 100 degrees. Water is scarce and the flies are plenty. Herbert Hoover, with skill and hard work, not only improved the mine, he developed new ones. After working in Australia, he had a reputation as one of the best mining engineers in the world. From Australia to Paris, to London, to New York, taking 5 trains to cross the United States, Hoover raced to act on a decision he had made 4 years before. He came back to California to marry Lou Henry. They were married on a Friday, and by noon Saturday they were on their honeymoon trip to the Empire of China. The job of the new Director General of Mines of the Celestial Empire was a large one. The mines were centuries old and still worked the same way. The mining laws were as old as the mines themselves. It would be hard work to make changes to the ancient civilization. Hoover gathered his team from engineers he'd met around the world. He staffed his large offices by training the locals in modern mining. But his work was interrupted by the Boxer Rebellion. True to his Quaker upbringing, Hoover would not take up a weapon. He used his engineering skill for the defense of the city. He performed many tasks during the siege, often at the risk of his own life. After China, Hoover was made a junior partner. The family moved to London, where Lou could raise their 2 sons in comfort and safety. He traveled the world, circling it many times. In Russia, he made a languishing mine profitable again, but there is more to it than digging minerals out of the ground. He brought pride and purpose to all of his endeavors. In Burma, the mining operation required new towns, railroads, and harbors to be built. Such an undertaking brought Hoover's administrative skills and vision to the project. Herbert Hoover and his family were in England when, according to Hoover, the U.S. ambassador, a close friend, came to him with a problem. Thousands of Americans were trapped in Europe. The U.S. government, unable to move quickly, could do nothing for them. Could he help? Hoover said yes, he could. Gathering investors and risking his own money, Hoover helped stranded Americans to leave Europe. Overall, nearly 120,000 Americans returned home to safety in the first 4 months of the war. At the time, Hoover felt he was just aiding Americans. But later, as he stated, I started sliding down the slippery road to public life. The Germans attacked France by going through Belgium and Luxembourg, leaving Belgium devastated. The armies of the Kaiser seized the food stocks and left the population destitute, facing a winter without shelter or supplies. The Belgian king sent an envoy to England to ask for help. England, entangled in the war, could not. The British ambassador arranged a meeting between the envoy and Herbert Hoover. He remembered how Hoover had helped his fellow Americans. Was there anything Hoover could do for the destitute millions in Belgium? Herbert Hoover said he could help only if two conditions were met. 1, he would receive no pay or compensation. 2, he would be in total control. The young man from the Iowa prairies, who built a personal fortune as well as a sterling reputation as a mining engineer, now faced his greatest challenge. 9 million people, trapped between two opposing armies, surrounded by an ocean filled with battleships and submarines, were desperate for food and hope. How do you get millions of tons of food from around the world to the millions of people who are starving? Across oceans, across battlefields, through armies eager to seize it. That was the problem for the Commission for the Relief of Belgium, or the CRB. They hired 256 ships from around the world. From South America came beef, from North America wheat, from Asia rice. Barges and railroads were used in the Netherlands to get the food to Belgium. The ships, clearly marked as relief ships, were attacked by the submarines that stalked the seas. Only a few were sunk, most got through, but the explosive mines that blocked the waterways and harbors did not care how well marked the ships were. Herbert Hoover convinced the British Admiralty to show them the way through the minefields that blocked neutral Holland. He convinced the generals to let his supplies pass unmolested through their armies. Herbert Hoover didn't do all of this from London. Unarmed, he braved the mines, submarines, and soldiers, making over 40 trips through Europe in the thick of the war to make sure the food was getting through. He traveled secretly, unknown except to the people of the CRB. One night in Belgium, local people found out that the man who was standing between them and starvation was staying in a local house. The Belgians asked if they could thank Hoover personally, but were turned away. They returned with a note of thanks and pushed it through the mail slot. All night long, hundreds of notes of thanks, notes of hope, piled up inside the house. Mr. Hoover had made the difference for millions of people. Herbert Clark Hoover started life on the prairies of Iowa. He proved himself in the deserts of Australia, in the empire of China, the steppes of Russia, and the jungles of Burma and South America. He was the first man to assemble and run a worldwide relief organization. The Commission for Relief in Belgium was a prelude to other world food relief efforts. Following the war, Hoover used his skills to feed tens of millions more as the world recovered and rebuilt. At the end of the First World War, the New York Times called Hoover one of the 10 most important living Americans. Herbert Hoover would go on to be elected president by a landslide, but that's another story.